Welcome back, everybody, to the Cellar Dwellers podcast. This time up, myself and Christian, have seen two recent horror movies over the last couple of weeks. They came out pretty close together. As you can tell by my background and the thumbnail of the video, first we're going to be talking about Pearl, and next we're going to be talking about Smile. I think we both have a lot to say about these ones, but Christian, if you want to lead us off into the conversation of Pearl, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, first off, it's kind of sad to think that the last entertaining, and I guess because I think both these movies are good. Again, I know we'll discuss a lot more in more depth, as we get going here. But it's funny to me that the last solid horror movie I saw in the theaters was X, which is the first movie that came out before Pearl, but it takes place after the events of Pearl, obviously. So if you kind of really think about it,
I think.
Yeah. So we saw X, and I'm not. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I'm sure we saw a couple of horror movies in between, maybe, but none that really I can remember. It's kind of crazy. Like the beginning and the end of the year, there was not a lot of good stuff in between, and it's also kind of just to say, from just to talk a little bit more about X, but when you and I were seeing Pearl, we were kind of talking a little before, but also during the movie, or right before the movie, I should say, we were talking about how it's kind of nuts that a sequel came out this quick, in the same year. I mean,
Yeah.
just to put that in perspective, okay, Star Wars came out in 1977. It took almost 3 years later to get a sequel, and I'm not comparing X and Pearl, but it's just usually you don't get a sequel till at least a couple of years down the line. Again, unless you're maybe the MCU and you're pumping out new movies every other month. But I don't know. It's just kind of wild and something we never really seen. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah. So when I was writing my review for this movie, I read that director Ty West and star Mia Goth started discussing this movie, Pearl, the idea for it during their production. And if I remember correctly, they started writing the script either during X or immediately after. So that by the time X had finished production, they immediately went into production for Pearl. So it was a very quick turnaround. I also have written down here in my notes, I don't know how true this is, but I saw it. It was made with the production crew of Avatar 2, believe it or not. They were working in a lot, I think, nearby, and they worked on Pearl on their days off from Avatar.
Yeah,
honestly,
does that detract from your enjoyment and pleasure?
No, not at all, because I think Pearl is a much better movie than Avatar 2, and Avatar 2 is not even out yet.
Yeah. I will say, I gotta be fair. I can't knock the production crew of Avatar for these are just people making the movie.
They're just getting their paychecks.
Right. So it's they're not the creative thinkers behind such a dumb movie. Again, discussion for another day, as we like to say. Yeah. But that's a fun little tidbit for sure.
Yeah, I read that. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So then obviously they worked on Pearl immediately after X, and supposedly very, very shortly thereafter, they greenlit Maxine, which is the third in the trilogy.
Crazy. They had a teaser at the end of the movie. It's I've just never seen a trilogy just thrown out that quickly.
Well, I think A24 had a lot of they saw how well X was received, and then
right.
They obviously had a lot of faith in Ty West to even greenlight a sequel, because that's not something A24 does. I think they only did it one other time before this for a movie that I can't quite remember, like The Souvenir or something. Out of 100-something films, I mean, they never do sequels, so to even have this, I guess, prequel, not really a sequel, is incredible.
Right. But if I could get back on track to your initial question on my thoughts about Pearl, in a short way of saying it, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. I think with X, I went into that movie, as you like to do with a lot of films, basically just seeing the what's it called, the cover poster of and Ortega girl, I forget her first name, but that
Yeah.
like Jenna Ortega was a
Yep.
really young, good actress. You know, that great shot of her just like looking horrified. Like that's literally the only thing I saw of the movie. Like I might have saw a teaser trailer on TV, but like I went into that film blind and like went out like really enjoying it. It was such a good movie. It had, I think we've talked a little bit about it in the past. I think we did a discussion about BAFTA, right? Or
Not
maybe
on
it's just
here, I don't
I
think.
can't keep track, because believe it or not, folks, Andrew and I talk about movies outside of the podcast, if you can
Great.
believe that or not.
I know I wrote a
Um,
full review on it, but I don't think we
yeah.
discussed it professionally.
But no, so I really enjoyed that movie. It had a lot to it. The number one thing I kept thinking of it was Texas Chainsaw vibes, like big time, like big
Yep,
time, big time, big
definitely.
time. And
Definitely.
as you know, you kind of geared me in the direction to watch that. Because I hadn't seen it. Shockingly, I love horror, but I hadn't seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre up until like a few years ago, and just that's a masterpiece of a movie. So I just love those vibes and kind of the unknown and not knowing what the hell's going to happen in the next scene, and just the twists and turns the movie had, and just from the first kill with Pearl, it's like, holy shit, like, okay, this is the movie
Oh,
they're
it's so
gonna
good.
get to. You know, to the Blue Oyster Cult, Song of the Reaper, like just
Hmm.
fantastic. Which, believe it or not, Andrew, I did a little digging too. That same song is playing in Halloween, one of our favorite all-time horror movie slashers, the goat of all slashers, if I must say. Anyway,
When?
it's playing in that scene when Annie and Laurie are driving to the houses and Michael's following them.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. When they go to like
Yes,
pull over and talk to Annie's dad,
yes,
and they're
yes.
like, "Hey,
Like,
he's
get
gonna
rid of
smell
the
the
weed.
pot."
He's gonna
Yeah,
smell
yeah,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's right. I forgot about
Fun
that.
little fact. So, I mean, I'm sure this guy Ty West knew that very well and chose that song for that particular
Oh,
scene.
of course. He
Obviously, I
had to
mean,
have. He had to have known that.
as you know, I call it like a Kubrickism. I love directors that just throw little references in there to other horror movies, other
Mhm.
horror genres, just for crazy fans like us to pick up on and just continuously go back and be like, wait,
Yeah.
what did I can't believe I missed that. And I'm sure once again, you and I watch X, we'll probably see new things or new dialogue or whatever,
Yeah.
things we missed the first time.
I think it was
But
to that point. Quick side note, if I can find it real quick, I think it was the Black Phone. If you remember seeing that movie, yeah, the Black Phone takes place on Friday the 13th. So
really,
yeah, there's a newspaper shot and it's like Friday, September 13th or whatever it is. Um, so it's a fun little detail. I like when movies do that. You're right. Especially this one set in, well, X set in the 70s to kind of like ground it in that foundational slasher horror. Um, Pearl obviously was a little different, set in 1918, not the 1970s.
yes,
The first thing I thought of when writing this review of like, okay, so if X is inspired mostly by like Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw, Halloween, all those, what is Pearl inspired by? Because it's a slasher, okay, but it's more of like a drama-driven slasher where you
right,
have to follow the character and the story, and it's a great character-driven film, which we'll get into in a minute. But my thought was that okay, Pearl is kind of inspired by like Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz kind of thing. You know,
sure,
the bright Technicolor and the oh well, I'm just a living on the farm, you
right,
know,
right,
and
right, right.
but it's like sick and twisted and demented. And I have a partial quote from Ty West that describes it as a demented Disney children's movie. Um, which like I
Yeah,
could see,
yeah,
uh,
totally.
because Pearl is living in her own. I don't even want to call it a fantasy world. Even it's just like
I mean, she fucks
she's
a
messed up.
scarecrow, so that's all you need to know.
Yeah, that's true. She did do that. She did do that. Um, but yeah, that's actually oddly enough a good segue into how Pearl, I think, was a fantastic character film, even though it's for a character that's already established, right? In X,
Right.
we know Pearl, we know the old lady Pearl, and how she has these character traits of jealousy, lust, um, violence, misunderstanding of God, dissatisfaction with her own reality. And the cool thing is that Ty West and his team put in seeds for every single one of those character traits throughout Pearl. So you have like the scene with the scarecrow, you have the envy with her sister-in-law Mitzi, who Pearl thinks gets the singing job, the dancing job. You have obviously the whole movie is built around her dissatisfaction with her own life. There's the misunderstanding of God. Obviously, the whole thing is riddled with inclination to violence. Like one of the first things she does in the movie is kill the duck and feed it to the alligator, right?
Right.
Which could possibly be the same alligator, because I also looked it up and they lived 30 to 50 years. So if it's an older alligator, it's the same one.
Yeah. Or the
But
mother.
Yeah, it could
of
be. Could be.
Um,
But yeah, what do you think about the character point? Because it's difficult nowadays to find a really solid horror movie that's built around building a character.
no, this is true. Yeah, I mean, I kind of didn't finish my first thought because, as always, we get sidetracked
Sorry,
here in discussion. No,
my bad.
it's. I think that's what makes just like good, back and forth talk here. I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to do. So, but anyway, yeah, with Pearl, like I don't want to say I knew exactly what to expect, but like I was sitting there, right, and I'm just like, okay, when is she gonna have the snap? Like, when is she gonna just
When is
go
she gonna
Pearl?
break down?
Yeah. And so that's kind of the enjoyment and excitement I had to just see her that full transition, because like she's self-aware in the sense of like she knows there's something not all there with her, but like
Mhm.
she doesn't want to accept it because she does desperately, as you see, like want to try to fit in with society and be like that, I guess at the time like a popular dancing girl or on
That's
film or
true.
something, or
Yeah.
travel the country and stuff like that, and be famous, as I guess that might have been a lot of girls outs at the time, to try to get literally on center stage. And I think kind of once she comes to the realization that like the world's a pretty cruel place in that sense, especially when it comes to, getting trying to grasp that star power, find that stardom. It's next to impossible for people, right? So
Mhm.
she basically has, like, for a lack of a better term, a fuck it moment. And it's like, oh yeah, whatever. I am who I am. I don't care.
That
I
monologue
think I
was
think oh my
unbelievable.
god, that was yeah,
Unbelievable.
we can get into that a little later. But
Yeah.
um, also too, it's like there's a lot of good symbolism and themes of this idea in everyone's life, that you're really a product of your environment, you're a product of your upbringing, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Her resentment for her living situation with her family, having that stern, foreign mother with like all these traditional ideals and stuff, and women are supposed to stay home and take care of the house and take care of their husband and tend to the needs around the farm and tend to the needs around their family, and not do anything for themselves. Like, you put yourself last. Like, that was something she constantly struggled with. And you don't really know why her father's like disabled unless you picked up on it. I don't. You
I
just kind
think
of
they
acceptance like that.
I
Like,
think they implied that it was the Spanish flu, but they didn't
yeah,
say outright. Either way, it doesn't
yeah.
really matter. I mean,
That's why
it's
I figured he had some type of illness, whether it be like,
yeah.
I don't know, tuberculosis or whatever was kind of prominent back then, that really like obviously stunted him for the rest of his life. But she didn't want to deal with that. And it's like, it's kind of a cliche at this point of like the main character like expecting, wanting more out of life and wanting to literally leave the farm, leave the small town, and go to Hollywood and make it big and stuff. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of a cliche that in my opinion has been very overdone and kind of a very simplistic way to frame your protagonist, I'd say, in movies.
Hmm.
But like I said, I knew what to expect, and so once that turn happens, it's like must watch cinema, man. Like, it's, the kills were just unreal when she snaps on, that guy she was fooling around with at the movie theater. That was a
Yeah.
very dark and messed up scene. And even just like, what the scene that stuck most in my head and I keep thinking of, and it's just, because it was so perfectly shot and so perfectly edited, is when she steals the alligator egg, and it's like a scene of going back and forth of her just like
Oh, squeezing the egg.
trying
Yeah.
to squeeze the egg, and like
Yeah.
there's that shot of what's her husband's name? Harold, right? No, whatever his name is.
I think so. I have it written down somewhere.
Henry or Henry Harold, I don't know, one something with an H, doesn't matter. But when she's trying to squeeze that egg, it's like a simultaneous shot of him walking
Howard.
back to the Howard. Yeah,
I found it. It's Howard.
Howard. Yeah, when he's walking back, to the farm, and there's that shot, and he blows up, and then at the same time the egg explodes, and it's just like good kudos to Ty West, because I can't get that out of my head. It's so disturbing. I don't know why, because you just see the blood come out of the egg, because you're like you see eggs, you're just the friggin' yolk and the egg whites. That's what, but it was just gruesome, and you're like, holy shit, like that scene is what's gonna stick with me. And on top of all the crazy messed up kills that happen in the movie, I mean, that I'll never forget. And so it's like, again, kudos to him, because when you can do that, your movie must have done something right. But yeah, long story short, like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved how it was like a character-driven horror movie. I think that's a lot of times very tough to accomplish, because what do most people want to see in a horror film? Well, they want to see like the torment of the main character and kind of the downfall of it. So you don't really give a shit about the main character. You're like, okay, where's the kill and how do I get to it? That's really all people are looking for, and the jump scares and the uneasiness, and
which is something that X did eventually, because at some point during X they realized that the audience is in it for a slasher. So at that point, you have to start piling up the bodies, and the story, while still important, gets cast a little to the wayside. Not in a bad way at all. That's just how slashers are. I think that Pearl. So let me preface this by saying, as we'll get into with Smile, I think Smile was also it was just an incredible way of building a character inside of a horror movie. But to your point that you mentioned a minute ago, like how do you create that dynamic between what the audience wants to see, the kills and the monster, versus building that main character? With Pearl, I think it was kind of almost self-explanatory, because Pearl is, one, the main character, and two, she is also the monster. So you explain both of them, and you check both of those boxes. Smile was a little different, because there obviously was a main character and a monster. But yeah, Pearl was, I mean, like I said, the way that they were able to create these connections with X of how Pearl ended up becoming who she is. For me personally, I'm not going to say that X or Pearl was significantly better than the other. I will say that I enjoyed X more, because, as you know, slashers are my favorite. And Pearl, like I said, was more of a narrative driven movie, which again is totally fine. I would have, however, liked maybe an extra like 5 minutes tacked on at the end to just go through what Howard was thinking. Because by the time we get to X, he's already fully immersed in his wife's lifestyle of sex and murder and bloodshed. But obviously when he gets home at the end of Pearl, he's like, well, what's going on here, Pearl? And, like the mutilated parents are hanging over at the dinner table. And I think that it would have been great for there to be a little bit of exposition into Howard. However, I understand that he's not the focus of the movie, nor is he the focus of the trilogy. The trilogy is, about Maxine and Pearl and the relationship between them.
No, I agree though. I think Howard definitely should have played some slightly larger role, or had some more screen time, because it's like you kind of have to consider the buy-in factor now. It's like, okay, he just came home from war, so he already probably has somewhat PTSD before it even became a thing, some trauma that he's gone through in the war, coming back from World War I, obviously in Europe. So he comes back, and just think of that, like coming back and seeing your wife's parents mutilated, decaying bodies rotting on the table with old rugs.
Viciously mutilated, might I add.
Yeah,
Well, the mother at least.
I mean, that's a lot of buy-in, but so it's like I agree, like I wish they kind of framed that a little bit better, maybe had him come back a little earlier and then had some type of dialogue between the two and like you said, some type of transitional, character shift, like, okay, I'm with you, honey, whatever it takes, I'm for you. You probably had a reason to murder or mutilate your parents, so I'll help you. I'll help you cover it up. And then it's like, okay, this makes sense. Like he's just a fucking fully committed husband and just is a yes man. So but again, it's not too significant, but at the same time, it's like you gotta kind of just accept the fact that that's kind of what he becomes and who he is. Because also when you think of it in X, right? Like I sort of disagree with what you said. Like I know it's about Pearl and Maxine and that great dichotomy between the two characters and stuff, and her obviously seeing a lot of herself in Maxine. But Howard is a murderer in the film too. Like he commits
Yeah, true.
vicious acts of murder too. So yeah,
Blows Jenna Ortega's fingers off.
yeah, he's not the focal point of the film by any means, but he's a pretty significant part. So by that, standard, I'd be like, I kind of expected to see him a little bit more than, the snippets we saw of him in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, honestly, I didn't expect him to just show up for not even the last 2 minutes. He just walks up in the house and then that's it. That's all you see of him. I mean, aside from like pictures and flashbacks and
right.
all that kind of stuff throughout the film. Let's just very quickly talk about the monologue, because I think that she killed the projectionist before the monologue, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. Because then she took his okay. So
She's
after Pearl,
monologuing to her sister-in-law, Howard's
yeah,
sister.
yeah. So Pearl and her sister-in-law Mitzi go back to the farm after Pearl
Dance
miserably
auditions.
fails
Yeah.
the dance auditions, which we all knew was coming.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and there's this monologue given by Mia Goth, who is speaking to Mitzi as if she's speaking to her husband Howard. And this is, I think, where Pearl really begins to, as a character, embrace her flaws and connect those to her own image of self-value, whether that be high or low. I think that when she starts to say that, like, well, my mother was right, there's something wrong with me, that's like, that line in particular is, I think, where she fully accepts the fact that, yep, I murder people and there's nothing that's gonna go wrong with that. Like, there's nothing that's gonna change that. And then obviously, shortly thereafter, she brutally murders Mitzi just in the front yard. Like, and this movie, what I like about it is that a lot of horror movies nowadays dance around the violence and gore. So, they'll show someone holding up the axe and swinging it, but they won't show it like chopping off the arm. This one shows Pearl chopping off the arm, ripping the arm off, the blood and the bones sticking out, the blood spurting out. It's incredible. But
Something quick side note
yeah,
before I forget.
yeah,
I'm starting to turn into you in the sense of I am going to do my best from now on to avoid all and any trailers for any
yeah,
movie I really want to see, especially horror related, because I know you purposefully did not watch any trailers or teasers at all for this movie
no,
because you just
I
wanted
avoid them.
to go in blind, which is the way to go. But Andrew, when I tell you, they absolutely brutally, pun intended, murdered that scene, because like every end trailer, part for Pearl shows her chasing Mitzi with the axe. So like, all along she's gonna die. You're just waiting
Yeah,
for it. So it's like,
that's why I avoid trailers.
I was just like waiting to see when that happens. And I'm like, okay, I obviously knew it was gonna happen, and especially you especially know as a viewer, if you don't see that scene when she's at the auditions and that guy goes, "We're looking for a blonde," you're like, oh well, Mitzi's dead.
Yeah,
Because she obviously got it, because
yeah,
she goes in after her because she wanted Pearl to go first. But yeah, sorry to sidetrack your thought there, but all as I wanted to say too before we move on to Smile was Mia Goth. It was incredible in this movie. I mean,
Yeah,
oh my God, just
absolutely outstanding acting.
just the time and dedication she put into this movie to just get into that state of mind of Pearl, and obviously the same with X playing two characters. Something I didn't even know until you told me that she played Pearl too. So it's like
Yeah, so I mean, this is
I think
actually her second
that
time playing Pearl.
right, that just shows how good of a job she does when me as a viewer. I'd like to think I pick up on things, completely miss that. So it's
Yeah,
like kudos to her. But wow, I mean, what just unbelievable acting, unbelievable. Like just never for once was did I think I was like watching an actor portray a character. I was just fully like devoted. Like she
yeah,
is fucking in her. She is just doing her thing right now, and I'm loving every second of it. I
yeah.
mean, sorry to sound corny, but that's seriously like that's how well
No,
of a
I
job
totally
she did.
agree. I totally agree, and I think a lot of credit for that has to go to uh, the script. Obviously, it was written by Ty West, but this one was also co-written with Mia Goth. So Mia Goth, who has the actor's insight from X playing Pearl and Maxine, can then bring that experience to the writing of the script for Pearl so that she has her own input. And that I would like to think, I mean, I'm not an actor, I do my best work behind the camera, but I would like to think that if an actor is writing a script for the character that they've brought to life, they can almost see themselves acting as the character while they're writing it and
Right.
kind of have like a almost like a foresight to being on the set as the character. So
Right.
I think that bringing Mia Goth in to co-write the script to play the character that she's already playing in X is a fantastic idea.
Oh yeah.
I genuinely think that paid off.
Totally. Right. I didn't know that, and that makes a lot of sense. I think how she just completely nailed this performance of Pearl in this film, because she clearly probably wrote a lot of the dialogue for her own character. And I think
Mhm.
you just by doing that too, I think you just get way deeper involved as the character herself. I mean, you've heard some stories with actors and actresses like in terms of like the method acting they call it, like to get into character some of these people like are tapped. Like they will listen to like um, script reads like when they sleep and shit, and like just 24/7 do whatever it takes to get fully just involved as the character that they're playing, because it's just that's every things work different for different people, but yeah, it's just you can clearly tell the dedication level was just 110% from her,
I
like
think
top to
when
bottom.
I think when Daniel Day-Lewis was filming There Will Be Blood, I think it was him. He didn't shower for weeks or something during filming because
I believe it. That's disgusting.
people living in the time that the movie took place wouldn't have showers, something like that. Like character actors are weird, but I mean they're always the ones that give the best performances. Seriously, like
Yeah.
Heath Ledger as well in The Dark Knight. I mean, it's
Christian Bale too in a lot of his films,
yeah,
just completely diving into the character and just going MIA from their personal life for months on end just to just absolutely nail the performance. And you can tell that Mia Goth did that. And like I said, I I cannot wait to see Maxine, because I will see it again. I'm at the point now where anything A24 pumps out, I will go see, because they are just a dedicated, great film studio.
hell yeah,
Um,
baby.
and I think what they have going to is kind of their own independence. Like they're not overshadowed by a larger entity like the bigger film studio, corporations that are out there, like say Warner Brothers, that
Well,
just
yeah,
have a knack of fucking everything up.
they're the
That they
ones that make their own decisions.
so it's like that is just, as you and I always talk about, just creates that much more opportunity for just unlimited creativity
Mhm.
and just great groups of thinkers and people like us that are horror fans and lovers of the genre, and just fans of thriller, terror, every type of thing related to horror, just in a room, just throwing ideas at each other, seeing what sticks, bouncing. That's when you can create some great stuff. So
Yeah,
they are definitely in good hands. And like I said, Mia Goth, I will not be surprised if she continues to get more roles, because she's just such a good actress.
yeah. I'm hugely looking forward to Maxine.
So
I
would
think
it
it'll
be a
be
leap
set
and
in.
would it be a leap, Andrew, to say you and I really both loved X and Pearl?
I don't think so. I think that's a fair assessment, really. I think it's fair. Um, Maxine, I think will take place in 85-ish,
Hmm,
which is cool
okay.
because I also like the 80s.
Yeah, that'll be cool to see this the transitions literally of the times and the the settings of each film. It'd be really kind of cool, and there's a lot they could do there.
The one thing I'm concerned about, if concern is even the right word you could say, is that I think to continue this twisted relationship between Maxine and Pearl, obviously you have X to begin with that has the both of them, and then Pearl dies, spoilers, and then you have Pearl that talks about Pearl, but I know, sorry, it's like you haven't seen X or something. Then you have Pearl. Obviously, Maxine's not in it. So when the third one comes out, Maxine, I think the synopsis is that Maxine, the girl from X, made it into the adult film industry, and this is going to be following her dealing with, I guess, fame and fortune. So the only thing I would say is that I feel like there would have to be some sort of like post-trauma flashbacks to the night of X, just so that
Totally.
old Pearl can be in it in spirit to
Some
continue that
presence, right?
relationship.
Correct.
That's the only thing that I think
That's
they
exact.
need to do.
That's exactly the conclusion I made to how they're going to frame that movie. I mean, it's really the only logical explanation if it's something
Mhm.
along those lines to make it make sense, right? Like if it can't just be a completely different genre and not be like a horror slasher thriller type movie. If it's just showing fucking Maxine and a bunch of pornos, I don't think there's not much there.
The scene that'll stick with me and still has is that end credits, not even the end credits, it was just during the credits of Mia Goth just smiling into the camera for a solid 5 minutes. And there were like drool coming out of her mouth and tears running down her face, and her smile hadn't changed, and she's just staring directly at the camera. So it's like, she's staring. It's like if I do this right now and I'm staring at the camera, it's the same thing. It was incredible. I think that it's actually kind of ironic that the movie we're going to talk about afterwards is Smile, and it's like the same idea.
Perfect segue.
Want a break from the ads? Subscribe to Cellar Dwellers Productions on YouTube. The ads won't go away, but you'll see more great content like this. Okay, so Smile came out when? Friday? It's like,
Also, we can cut. We can throw that segue part in, so you can find that part and just throw it in here. Just repeat it. That'd be funny. You know what I mean?
what segue part?
Remember the part where I said like, "Oh, this is a good segue into it." Like you can keep that part of the dialogue, but then cut that part and add it to the beginning of this part of the video. You get what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
You got to do
Okay,
that.
action. Okay, so Smile came out a couple days ago now at this point. When do we see it? Friday night? Oh, I see what you're doing. Huh, that's funny. I think we saw it a couple days ago. The trailers for this, like, I watched only because they were in the theater. Like, I didn't seek them out on my own.
Literally in your face. I mean, before like I feel like before the past 5 movies we've seen, this trailer was.
Yeah, whether they were horror movies or not.
Yeah.
The trailers, honestly, like, they were good. I mean, they made this look pretty scary, and from seeing the movie itself, I don't think the trailers really gave away too much.
No, definitely not.
So good, like good trailers, right?
That's what I think trailers should be. Just give
Right.
you some of the overall whatever plot, and just keep all the specific little details and jump scares or crazy scenes out of it. That's all you got to do. Short and
Totally
sweet.
agree.
What do you think?
Okay, I enjoyed it. I think that just like Pearl, I think Smile was a fantastic character-driven narrative. everything that happened in that movie served the purpose of furthering Rose's character. Rose is the main protagonist.
Hmm.
So everything that happened, there was barely any wasted space in terms of developing that character further. I think that the movie could get a little bit muddled in what I think it creates as its foundation, because obviously there's this monster slash curse. And for the sake of the discussion we're having, I'm just going to call it a monster. The monster itself, what's very important, not even just in horror, but in film in general, is if you have a monster like this or a creature or the other, whatever, you need to establish the in-universe rules so that the audience knows what to expect. Because not that you want to tell them what's going to happen, but if you throw caution to the wind when it comes to that and you say, like, okay, this monster cannot fly, and then the monster flies at the end of the movie, to the audience it's like, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. And then whatever believability you had in the audience is now gone. So creating the rules for this monster in Smile, I think, was very important, although none of it was really explicitly stated. I I think I would have liked for them to find a way to sneak that in there. Like you said when we left the theater. So does the monster exist in their mind or outside of their mind? Because clearly the monster can influence what the person thinks or sees or feels or experiences. It's very notable when towards the end of the movie, Rose goes to Joel's apartment, but she's not in Joel's apartment. She's still in the house that she thought was burning down. So, I mean, I think it's not a problem the way they describe the rules, but it's a little misleading, I guess, towards the end. And I think that that's probably the biggest problem I have with it, although it's not really even a problem because the narrative is fairly linear and you can still follow it regardless. But I did enjoy the movie. What are your initial thoughts before we dive a little deeper?
Well, I think to stick with how we kind of started off going over the problems of the movie, you definitely pointed out one of them that wanted to talk about being, this idea of the other and the monster. It just seemed a bit too convoluted, and there was a bit for me too much buy-in with the whole idea of this entity that is basically transmitted from one person to another person after somebody witnesses said person do a gruesome act and kill themselves,
Which is
and then they have
supposedly
that trauma.
after they're already dead, I think.
Yeah, again, it's very, there was a lot there. Again, the buy-in factor was huge, and
It's
I
heavy.
think
It's heavy.
it's a lot, and yes, that's a good way of putting it. um and I think this movie, its kind of downfall was it kind of got a bit full of itself and was too big for its own shoes, sort of thing.
Mhm.
um Again, just kind of starting with a simplistic idea of, like, okay, like there's some entity that is taking over these people, and they can only see it once they witness that other person that had it, kill themselves. Now they're fucking traumatized and see all these gruesome things, and they don't know who's who and whatnot. um and so it's like, and then it goes from that. You're like, oh, okay, I get this. It's sort of, similar to other movies that we'll get into, but whatever, it's believable, buyable, I like it, I'm on board.
Mhm.
And then when you have like the final, boss battle, the ending, the climax of the movie, you're like, well, wait a minute, like, okay, it can, so it's a separate entity now, and she's seeing it in its, like, I guess, true form. And then it says that line, like something about, yeah, I am in your mind and you control me, and it like
Yeah, they say
it's
something like it's your mind after all or something. So it's like, okay, but it's so you're not connected to her mind, but you can control her
right.
mind.
It just it I think it was an intentional curveball to kind of like be like, get the audience to be like, wait, what? And
Mhm.
like, and not a good idea to do it right at the end of the movie, if I must add. But anyway, yeah, it was just very, very confusing with the ending and how it transpired at the end, and the whole idea of kind of unraveling the being. Um, the other point I wanted to get into was, clearly this movie garnered a lot of inspiration from movies like The Ring, movies like It Follows. Basically, two of the same type of subgenres of horror, being that with The Ring, you have this cursed video of this possessed girl that it becomes this entity, demon, whatever, that if people watch that film, they die in 7 days and they kind of start seeing messed up shit too and kind of slowly
Mhm.
deteriorate in their mental state. And the seventh day comes and they get whacked, and it's like you kind of have your movie. And with It Follows, it's literally a sexually transmitted demon, an entity that
Yep.
once you get whatever by said person that had it, now you have it and you got to pass it on to somebody else. But it's like there's that guilt level, and kind of what makes that movie good is like, does she pass it on to someone else or does she deal with it and try to kill it? What? So, but same type of idea, right? Like only
Very,
this one
very, very
person,
close. Yeah.
only this one person is going through this and can see these things, and nobody else can. And then there's the whole idea of, you gotta believe me, you have to believe me, I know what I'm
Yeah.
seeing.
Which
And in this movie,
that I have a lot to say about.
yeah, and
Gets
this
that
movie
movie.
really kind of overdid that, because it's like they kind of wisely chose someone in our society that is trying to disprove crazy people, being a psychiatrist, a therapist,
Yep.
which Rose is.
Yep.
So I thought that was a kind of unique and smart decision to kind of have that,
I agree.
take that character and they take that profession and go after her. And
Yep.
so now her mental state deteriorates, and you're like, okay, well, this can happen to anybody. Then we're all freaking human. So I did enjoy that, but it got to a point where you're like, okay, we get it. Like you're like, it's sad, but it's like, I mean, it's just that like the thing I mentioned. Excuse me. Like, you gotta believe me. You gotta believe me. I know what I'm seeing. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy, and I'm
Yeah.
not
The
crazy
the
because I'm a therapist.
non-believes narrator.
Right. So that was just overdone.
Yeah.
But however, I will say, back to your initial point about this movie, I do think it was a very well done character driven horror film,
Hmm.
because there was,
Very much so.
the actress that played Rose, I think, did a phenomenal job. And a lot of the scenes were really well done. And like I said, something I really liked about it that I said to you walking out was, this movie, man, pick and chose its few sweet spots to have solid jump scares. I mean, like, you don't even know what's
Yeah.
coming.
And I don't give credit for those very often.
Oh, and it was not overdone. It was perfectly timed. Happened maybe a few times throughout the whole movie. That's about a 2 hour runtime, give or take.
Yeah. Just under.
So it's like perfectly sprinkled in there, and there's long build up, so it gets your guard down, and then it's like, dang, and it happens. Oh shit! Like, so I like that a lot. You do need that. You do. It's good to have a good jump scare every now and then. And like I said, when it becomes an issue is when it's overdone and it's like every other scene, and then it just becomes predictable and
Yeah.
it gets lazy, and that's when the film will start to suffer. But um, not that we're done here, but just my kind of final wrapping up thoughts about this movie overall is, I enjoyed it. I think it was a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
Um,
It was
I
fun.
honestly, I think I enjoyed it more than you and Baylin, who also saw it with us. And I think also, I must add, I honestly think I enjoyed it more than The Ring and It Follows.
I
Because
know you're not a big It Follows guy.
yeah, it's no, I liked it. It's okay, but there's a lot that it was just a bit too odd for me. Had a lot of good messed up scenes that I liked, but and then The Ring just kind of like loses its way, I feel like, halfway throughout the film, and just has a lot of pacing issues. But I think this one, for the most part, up until again the end with the try that full buy-in with the entity,
Mhm.
that's when I kind of like lost. Like, it went from being like, to me, a very solid good film to like just a pretty good okay horror movie. And like I said, when you can keep me fully intrigued and invested in the film throughout, you're doing something right, and gets a check in my book. But Yeah, I mean, what are some of your thoughts on, what I kind of just had to say there?
Good question. Um, One of the things I thought about very early on in the movie, because the whole curse getting passed on to Rose happens before the title splash card even comes up.
Right.
But in the therapist room, Rose is talking to a girl named Laura who has the curse, and Laura's saying like, "Well, it's like this thing that wears people's faces like masks, and only I can see it." And she's like getting really confused of what to say. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, just ask Rose if she's ever seen It Follows. She'll know exactly what you're talking about. Um, but that's just a little like fun little jab. I think that it
Right.
has very heavy inspiration from It Follows. Um, I think a little bit of inspiration also comes from Insidious with the jump scare. The one jump scare that I really liked.
Yeah.
Um, and this
Know
is like a
exactly
big
which one you're
spoiler of
talking
giving away
about.
the
Yeah.
good jump scare if you don't want to hear about it. But she's on the computer and she's like listening to the recording, and she looks in the kitchen, and then when she looks back, there's like this monster right here that just yells like Rose and
Rose. Yeah.
screams. And it's very akin to the jump scare of the red looking dude in
Darth Maul.
Insidious. Yeah, the Darth Maul looking dude. Um, and that I think is one of the greatest jump scares because it's not even a scene that you expect there to be
Jump scare.
a scare, and
Right.
that's what makes it so good. It's not like
Right.
it's not like the modern fascination with building up some really tense music, have the music drop for a second, and then a jump scare pops up. That's stupid, lazy, and predictable, I think, honestly.
Yeah, it's very it's the best. It's done best when it's the least predictable.
Exactly. So to
Yes.
your point about the narrator not being, or the protagonist not being believed, I agree with you for the most part of that. It is what I called a tired trope in movies where something bad happens to the protagonist and they're like, you gotta believe me, and nobody believes them, obviously, because why would you? Like, you're
Right.
literally talking about seeing ghosts and spirits and monsters and curses. Nobody's gonna believe you in the real world.
Nope.
I think there's about 3 separate occasions where Rose goes through that exact situation in this movie. I think it's with, um, obviously, there's that great one with her sister. I think that's probably the best one because that brings in elements of her mother in the background of the two characters. There's, I think, her fiance and her therapist. Maybe I could be forgetting, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, I do agree that it's a tired trope. It's like by the time you get to the second or third one, you're like, oh, come on, this movie's 2 hours as it is. Like, we really got to drag this out again. Um, but at the same time, like I mentioned earlier, it still serves the character of Rose because each one, each time that she explains herself to these people, it shows her sanity degrading more and more and more, to the point where when she talks about it with her sister, they're just throwing insults at each other because they're just frustrated that they can't, come to this agreement. And I think you and I laughed the hardest when Rose goes back to the car after having that argument with her sister, and she's freaking out because she thinks she sees something, and then it shows her nephew that's like 7 years old or something, like peering through the blinds, and he's like,
Horrified. Yeah.
it's like, dude, you and I were killing ourselves laughing, and nobody else was laughing. But
Yeah.
then again, they laughed at the stupid parts, like that one kid that got up and danced in the aisles at one point after he got popcorn. Like, sit down and go back to third grade.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry. But
No,
yeah,
you're right.
I think that the movie itself, the narrative was a very slow burn. There were a lot of just sort of like meditative shots of like Rose sitting in the car or at home drinking wine. I think that the internet exposition is overdone in everything. And I know I leaned over to you at one point. She was reading a police report or something online, and she highlighted something. And I leaned over to Christian and I go, God, I'm so glad they highlighted it so that we know what to read. And it's just like,
Please read this.
yeah,
Read this. This part's important. Please
it's
pay
just,
attention to this.
it's almost just like a cop out of exposition at that point,
It's getting
because
spoon fed.
yeah, so I think that there are definitely other ways they could have done it.
And you don't, it doesn't have to be that blatant. You can just do like a quick close up of a certain couple sentences for like a 5-10 second shot
Yeah,
to just get the gist of what she's reading. You don't need to freaking highlight it and color code it and all that and connect the dots. Like, you and I like, we are critical thinkers, right? Like, we like thinking about the movie and thinking what is about the movie, what it's about, the hidden themes, what's, below the surface level, because there
yep,
always is more stuff to every movie than just what's on the surface level. I mean, to think about a movie and go back to it and rewatch it down the line, like look at stuff that you might have missed or picked up on, or kind of confirm your suspicion about something you think. I think that's what the movie going experience is really all about. Just trying to critically think of every type of movie and then formulate your own opinion on it.
yeah. And I mean,
And
give your audience some credit too. I know
right,
not everyone is a big movie buff going to the theater, but
or as we say, cinematically literate.
yeah, not everybody's cinematically literate, but I mean, give them some credit, right? Like, even the most cinematically illiterate people we know probably could have figured out the things that they
Right,
highlighted on the screen. I don't
right.
even remember what they were at this point.
One other thing I wanted to bring up was
Yeah.
I did really love the fucked up dark moments this movie had.
Oh yeah.
Two
Yeah.
two examples for sure was when she has that like premonition of going in the hospital and murdering that guy and just stabbing him a bunch of times with a knife, and he's just laughing at her and like with blood coming out of his mouth, and
Carl.
then her boss is like, "What are you doing?" and starts peeling his face, and
Dude, that was crazy. He just like peeled his whole skin off.
it brought back to me. It was like, it was almost like, I'm trying to think. It reminded me of like a fucked up like war movie, like with just the gruesomeness like of battle and stuff and blood and gushing and people losing limbs. And then it had like Thing and like They Live vibes, like with peeling off the skin. Like, and those are like two of my favorite movies, as John Carpenter is one of my favorite directors.
Mhm.
But it was kind of the best of both worlds in that sense. And I ate up that scene. And then the other scene that was like, what the fuck, is when they're at the birthday party and you're like, oh, it's
Yeah.
building up. Like the kid, again, spoiler alert, big one, but she goes to this like model train store, antique toy store, whatever, and buys the kid like a model train. And you're like, the tone of the scene is like, okay, like this kid's with his friends, like they're gonna be like, what the fuck is that old train? Like, that's fucking stupid. So you
Yeah,
kind of
like
like
Rose doesn't
feel
want to
bad.
be there, and
Right, you kind of feel bad for the aunt, like you're like expecting like, oh, he's gonna see the train, like what the fuck do I do with this? Like, because it's a
yeah.
modern day kid, like what do they do with the train? Like they wouldn't know where to begin. And then there's like, kudos to the kid. Like, I don't know how they got around this, what they did, but he's like, there's like a long pause and the camera's framed on the front of the shoe box that the gift is in, and all of a sudden he just slowly pulls out and it's her fucking dead mutilated cat, and like it's just a scene changer and
Yeah.
everyone's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And it kind of answers a question that was in an earlier scene when her cat goes missing, but it's like, wow, like they went there, okay, like, so that had a lot of dark horror, dark genre, dark narrative. Definitely got some credits on that stuff. I really like to see, and I know you enjoy it too, so
Yeah. That was one of the
definitely love
scenes
both of them.
where I was I was honestly fully expecting that when that scene was over, I was gonna be like, oh, okay, so this is like another one of her um like
Episodes.
yeah, it's one of her like horror induced fantasies, right? Like it didn't
Right,
actually
right.
happen. And then it goes to the next scene where she's in the hospital and her arms are
You're like,
wrapped up from falling through the
you're like,
table. And I'm going, oh,
yeah,
okay, so we're committing to the dead cat in the toy box. Great, cool, love to see it.
yeah.
Um, I think
Uh,
the last well, I'll throw this one small thing in first before we go on to the big last the big last point. I would have liked to hear a little bit more from the character in prison whose name I do not remember.
I'm trying to
Robert Talley, I believe that's who it was.
Yeah, one of the former victims that
Yeah,
broke her leg
because
with the chain.
he's the only living person to have, well, that we know of, to have escaped the curse. And I know obviously he didn't know much more than we or Rose knew, but I liked that discussion between the two of them in the prison of like, well, how do we escape it? What do you know? How can you learn it? And then obviously he freaks out for good reason when he finds out that Rose is carrying the curse.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the last like big really big point that I have in my notes here is that the narrative of the movie focuses a lot on Rose, and with good reason, right? Like it's a movie about Rose, but did it need more exposition into the monster? And I guess that kind of ties into our first point about creating the rules for it. And the last question I have is sort of like an opinionated one. There's really no answer for it. But I guess like why smiling? Like, is it just to reinforce the theme of like something warm and friendly is now cold and deadly? Do you know what I mean? Is it just like a menacing image, or is there like sort of some other sort of meaning behind it, like the shot where they really focused in on the no pain smile in the hospital?
Well, I think it's more akin to the whole idea of like the uncanny valley, right? Like how your brain kind of depicts certain things and makes certain connections to like anytime you see somebody smiling, it brings a sense of like joy or ease, like easiness, ease,
Yeah, like image association.
comfortability, right? Like so they take something that's supposed to be some like a warming type of signal, say, for lack of a better term, right? And like just makes it really uneasy. And you're like, okay, I know like something's not right here. So is it a little cliche, corny, kind of dumb? Maybe, but it's also, I think that's kind of what I took from it, right? Like I said, just the whole idea, the whole concept of the uncanny valley of like the other, like we've kind of discussed, like
Yeah.
something is there, but not it's not there. Something that's just not fully right. Like your brain can kind of like really depict, like for example, when you see like those humanoid like wax figures or humanoid like androids or something, like your brain instantly knows, like even as close as a person that it might look like, it's not real. You can just tell. It's like an innate thing that's wired in everyone. So when you see somebody smile like that in that type of situation, you're like, wait a minute, like something's amiss here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's probably about just
And
as the best conclusion I could come to.
is that a generalized conception? Maybe, but that's kind of what I took from it. I mean, could there be a deeper meaning? Yes, but I don't really care to like find it.
Yeah.
No offense to the movie,
No,
but
no, 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 not at all. Um, yeah, my thoughts on the narrative focusing on Rose rather than the monster. I thought the balance was fine. Again, that balance starts to fall apart a little bit, like we said, when you're creating the rules and ideas for the monster towards the end. And a lot of those lines get blurred towards the end again when the monster takes the shape of the mother.
yep.
Before it reveals the I have to say, absolutely incredible creature design of the monster, where it has
Hmm.
like the four mouths, and I honestly couldn't think of a better way to describe it than it just looks like ground meat in the shape of a humanoid monster. Um,
You know what I thought a lot of in that scene when you kind of see its true form
yeah.
was when you get the hints of the true form of Pennywise from especially the new It movies, like
Oh
when you
yeah.
see the
Yeah, you're
deadlights
right.
and stuff and all those like the gaping mouth, a lot of that shot's kind of hyper focused with him and kind of synonymous with that character. So that's kind of what I thought was thinking of, drew connections to.
Yeah, I was thinking Beetlejuice, um, only because how the monster like opens up Rose's mouth so that it can climb in. It looked like Gina Davis.
that was a really cool touch.
Yeah.
Really messed up, but
And then obviously, quite possibly the most unique part about this movie is that it takes the final girl narrative and just shifts it on its head. Because obviously you expect Rose to live, you expect Rose to be the Laurie Strode that survives.
to
Uh,
break the chain.
yep, and she's not. She is not good enough to defeat the monster. She lights herself on fire in front of Joel, so that
And you're like, just stop it, Joel. Just save it or look away,
just
one or the other. And you're
run away, leave the house, drive away,
Right.
don't look at it. But
Right.
obviously, the cycle will continue. I genuinely hope they don't make a second one.
Me too.
I think it's not that I don't want to see a continuation of the monster. I just think I think it's better left with the understanding that the cycle has continued and the cycle will continue to continue, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Totally, was totally fine with the ending. It kind of played with your mind a little because it's like you think she defeats it, but at the same time you
You
don't
really
know
do.
for sure.
I was convinced. I was like, okay, she conquered her own mind.
Yeah,
Monster.
no,
Yeah.
I did too, and I think maybe that's why they threw that thing in, like, oh, like, I'm only in your mind, so you're like, wait, so I can control you, but maybe that was the intentional curveball to kind of get people's guards down to be like, oh, maybe it is dead, and then
Well, it worked. It worked.
Really, you should have known all along because that's what the movie kept doing, right? Like showing you fake scenes and stuff that was literally all in her head. So, you can look at it from that angle too. Do I like that part more, or do I like my initial synopsis of it? I'm going to stick with what I initially said. I think it's just way too much of a buy-in factor for me to kind of just keep getting, I don't know, just not fed lies, I don't want to say, but just keep trying to believe and
misled.
keep getting misled and keep trying to believe something that I'm just not still on board with, and you kind of lost me a bit. So it's kind of like one of those things, like once you kind of get off the train, you get off your stop, there's really not getting off. And that's not to say I didn't like the movie. I liked it. It was very enjoyable. But just in terms of the monster and this thing we talk about all the time, the other, which is a staple in many horror movies and is really the determining factor of it being, it has to be good to make the movie, or if it's bad, it breaks the movie. So that was really the main thing that I didn't love. But again, it was, I think, a very decently unique film. A lot of creative leeway, I think, from the writers and directors, and the
in a movie that was originally supposed to only be released on Paramount Plus, actually.
Yeah. And then and I don't know where the extra friggin' budget came from, because this movie was like more advertised than fucking Titanic.
I know. Well, early test screenings showed Paramount that they probably had something a little bit bigger on their hands, and that's when they released it in theaters. Which I'm glad they did, because a lot of shots, cinematography was very visually appealing. Although there were some odd stylistic choices and like editing, transitions, all that kind of stuff. Mostly towards the beginning, though.
That's something we touched on. Like, it had a lot of weird screen wipes in the beginning. That just did not fit the tone of the movie at all. You were like,
yeah, but honestly, I don't think it detracted from much. I think it was just an odd.
No, it was, but it kind of was a distraction, more or less, because that's something. Say again, not to toot our own horns, but that's something you and I pay attention to. It's like little details, like screen wipes, like we notice.
I think that because I was in the throes of editing one of my own short films, that I was like, that's like all I was doing earlier that day. It was like lighting, color, transitions. And so that, like, when I started watching this movie, I was so hyper focused on those kind of things that I couldn't not see them.
Right.
They honestly, they didn't detract from the experience for me. They were just,
they didn't detract. It was just a minor distraction.
Yeah. Just like dissolve transitions and camera flyovers, when like the camera would like look at a road and then turn upside down like that, and or like when the title splash came up and it was like techno music or something. I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Very odd stylistic choice. Totally.
But yeah, I enjoyed this movie. It's not quite as scary as the trailers make it out to be, to me personally. But I think the concept is pretty strong, especially when you back it with the foundation of, Rose being a therapist, and this is like her whole life, and she's the one that's supposed to be able to conquer problems of the mind, and this curse literally is a problem of the mind. and that desire to survive kind of defines her entire character throughout the
Mhm.
film.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the script was fairly well written. I think the only thing I have to say about it is the rules and limitations of the monster. I think with a little bit of fine tuning, you know, if you could go back, the fine tuning of those end scenes, I think that would have made this movie incredible. But otherwise, as it stands, I enjoyed it. I think it was a good movie, but not without its flaws.
Yeah, totally. No, I definitely agree. In terms of, us just going to the movies within like a week and a half apart, it was two solid movie outings in my opinion, two very good horror movies.
Yeah,
So
I enjoyed both of
that's
them.
that's never a bad thing.
I think they're really cool. There's a lot of good movies coming out lately that warrant seeing. I know you still have to see Don't Worry, Darling, right?
Yeah,
I saw it.
yeah, I
It was
gotta
good.
take that one to see it.
I got 2 pages
Yeah,
of notes right here and a full review posted on Letterboxd. I
that'll
am sure.
that'll probably be one of our next episodes.
Yeah,
I know
and then there was
we have a lot of catching up to do. I
Halloween
feel.
Ends soon.
Yep.
Maybe
Yep.
Black
Very
Adam.
pumped for that. Very pumped for that. Maybe not to copy this other um YouTube artist, but for he was like every year reviewing like one Halloween movie after another, and I think he was like up to Halloween 4 or something. So like I think the next one he's doing like Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers or something. So maybe we could kind of do that, sort of copy him, but try to
Can do
do it
something
better.
pretty similar,
Try
I
to
think.
try to try to do it different.
Yeah.
It's just tough because Andrew and I now have two different working schedules and both doing different things. So it's tough to try to find a time to get all we have, believe us, we're not just sitting on our asses. We have a lot of interesting episode ideas. It's just trying to implement and act on said ideas and actually sit down for an hour and a half or so and do a recording. But I love doing this. So, whenever we get the time, we'll definitely try to create more content,
We'll make it
down.
happen.
But yeah, so that's a wrap. But stay tuned for more stuff.
Thanks for
I will
watching. Thanks
just
for
I will
listening.
just say Andrew is working on a lot of his own personal films, so keep an eye on those. He does a
I
very
am
good job, and he's very dedicated and very passionate about it. And
bottled up. Coming soon,
gotta
baby.
say, very proud of your work. Not to get corny, but do a good job. So has a good
Thank you.
vision. So
Thank you.
keep an eye on all those cool short films he does, and keep an eye on this channel too and stuff for more podcasts that'll definitely be coming out.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself.
As always, tell your friends, neighbors, mailman, everyone. Aiden talking to you.
Dog Walker. Tell
And
Aiden.
Dog Walker,
Everyone
everyone.
call Aiden and tell him to listen.
Please just tell him. All right, well, stay tuned for what comes next on Cellar Dweller Productions. And until next time, it's the time of year, Andrew. Stay spooky.
Stay scary, baby.